Welcome to the Land to Lots podcast, powered by Launch Development Finance Advisors. And now your host, Carter Froelich.
Hello, everybody. This is Carter Froelich, and welcome back to the Land to Lots podcast. This is series number 3 of our discussion of the planning process as it relates to the launch sequence. If you haven't listened to the previous 2 podcasts related to the planning process, I encourage you to go listen to those in order, as this is a very linear process in how we break down transactions and plan for a financing, which includes not only special districts, but all sorts of other reimbursement mechanisms. In today's podcast, we're going to be picking it up where we left off, and that is once we've determined our eligible costs, our various types of financing mechanisms that are available to us. We've done a cost segregation analysis. We've looked at our property tax rates vis-a-vis the competition. We've estimated our potential bonding capacity of our bonds, either through special tax levies, special assessments, GO bonds, a combination of the two. And now we're looking at what can we do to reduce, eliminate, and defer. And we do this through what we call the RET analysis, where we're looking at those costs, we're looking at the conditions of approval, and we're looking at maps of where this infrastructure is coming from, going to, and we're asking ourselves the question, are there any infrastructure items that we can reduce the costs of? What does that mean? And here again, I'm a recovering CPA. I'm licensed in California, Arizona, and Texas, so I'm not going to come up with a better way to build a wastewater treatment plant. However, with that having been said, one of the things that we've noticed, and I'm going to use this as an example, anytime where a jurisdiction wants us to build something, they always want the Rolls Royce. They want the Rolls Royce of all wastewater treatment plants. And why? Because they don't have to pay for it. So if they've got another checkbook that they can look at, they want us to build the finest wastewater treatment plant that's available given the technology at the time. Really, when we start asking them the question, they don't necessarily need the Rolls Royce. What they're trying to do is just treat sewage and wastewater, and they want the potential to potentially reuse this resource as either non-potable water or to recharge it back into the aquifers. I mean, that is really the goal. So we began talking to them, is there a possibility, rather than the Rolls Royce, that we could possibly give you a Toyota? Still very functional, still has all of the bells and whistles, it's just not as expensive as the Rolls Royce. Also, for instance, we had a developer that initially discussed with us, they had to expand a wastewater treatment plant, and the city had wanted them to fund, in this case, it was a $48 million wastewater treatment plant. Obviously, that's a big number for any one developer to shoulder. So what we were able to do is to bring in other landowners in the area, and we established a large special district, non-contiguous, and we issued special assessment bonds and financed this wastewater treatment plant. All the 25 other landowners picked up their pro rata share of what this cost was, along with capacity, and we were able to solve that problem for our client. So here again, this is a way that we reduced the cost from paying $48 million just to this individual developer's pro rata share. The next thing we do is we take a look at, are there any infrastructure items that we could potentially eliminate? And here's another true story. We had a client, and actually we gotten kicked out of this transaction. This is the first and only transaction I'd ever been kicked out of. It was an instance where the developer brought us in and wanted to issue a $120 million bond up front to finance offsite and onsite infrastructure to serve the entire project. And they were going to sell all 5,000 lots in 5 years. And this is before the Great Recession. And we said, guys, just in case we don't sell all 5,000 lots in 5 years, why don't we phase this bond? And the developer looked at us and said, you don't share my vision, get out, and literally threw us out of the transaction. Fast forward 3 years, we were brought back into the transaction. He had lost the property, and the builders had it, and we were brought in by the builders to restructure this district that he had issued $120 million on. As part of that, one of the things we wanted to do was to go in and find what facilities we could eliminate. And as part of the development agreement with the city wanted to be known for the park capital of Nevada, and the development agreement required 30 volleyball courts, 32 basketball courts, 22 tennis courts, and 14 multi-purpose fields, plus 8 baseball fields, which was just complete overkill, right? Not only is this a lot for any one development, I mean, it was a regional facility, and the cost of this in 2011 was $57.9 million. The other thing that was kind of interesting about this project is that the development impact fee obligation, if we were just going to pull permits and pay the development impact fee to the city, was $8.5 million. Now, our client wanted to provide meaningful recreational facilities for their community. So what we did is we went in and renegotiated the development agreement, and we were able to bring the recreational component of the development agreement from $57.9 million down to $19.2 to be developed over time, which was a reduction of 68% of the costs. So this is what we mean by, is there something that we can eliminate? The next item we go into is what can we defer? And here again, this is kind of a standard one we run into a lot of times, but oftentimes the client will say, geez, the city came back and they want us to build a 6-lane, 4-lane divided arterial road. And, God, we don't even have our model complex out, and they want everything completed day one. So what we'll often do is go back to the jurisdiction and say, hey, listen, we're going to reserve the right-of-way for 4-lane, 6-lane divided arterial. But tell you what, we just want to build 2 lanes now. As the traffic counts increase and as our traffic studies demand will increase, we'll add more lanes, and we'll eventually get you to 4-lane divided median or a 6-lane divided median, whichever we're stipulated to build. And that's where we're able to defer costs into the future. Here again, not having so much money up front in our pro forma impacting our IRR, but we're really stretching it out over time as we're having revenue events, revenues coming in, and those facilities are actually needed. So that's what we mean by the reduce, eliminate, defer. Obviously, this goes into the pro forma and impacts IRR and nominal dollar over time. The next component that we'll take a look at is the development impact fee credit analysis, meaning are we having to finance any infrastructure that the jurisdiction is collecting a development impact fee? If so, what is our credit amount? And will we use that money to come back to us to repay us? Will we pass that on as a credit in terms of a higher land residual to the builder? What are our choices? And one of the things that Launch does, and we've done this, and as I tell our clients, it really depends on who's paying us. Master land developers will often have them come to us and say, hey, listen, Cart, we would like to set up a separate service area and levy a development impact fee to offset some of the costs that we cannot finance through the special district. Can you help us come up with a methodology to do that and work with the jurisdiction to make sure that that's enacted and those fees collected, in which case we do it. And other times we can set up private development impact fees, if you will, that we collect as part of the master developer. Other times we'll be engaged by home builders and or builder industry associations to challenge jurisdictions in relation to impact fees that they're charging. In fact, I was involved in the 2008 and 2016 update of the National Association of Home Builders Impact Fee Handbook. So this is something we know a lot about. And we're either trying to increase impact fees or lower impact fees, depending upon who is paying us. But it's something that we know a lot about. And obviously, to the extent that we're receiving impact fees that flow back in to reimburse us for infrastructure, or we're passing those on in terms of impact fee credits to the builders, which is impacting the land residual. I mean, it's a benefit to everybody involved in the transaction. But here again, this is something we need to know. This is something that we have a huge amount of experience in, and it's something that we collectively as the financing team need to bring to our clients' attention. So now that we've got all of these great financing mechanisms, we've set up all these mechanisms, and here again, when we're setting up financing mechanisms, we want to be very sober in what we think we're going to be able to do. We're not... Well, in some instances, we've made some things up that we've actually been able to pitch to the city and get them done. But we're very clear-eyed in what we tell our client we can do and what we can't do. But once we have all of this information to run multiple what-if situations, we'll often put this in the cash flow and an analysis that we call the cash flow and pro forma analysis. Obviously, our builder developers have sophisticated models, but in some instances, they're just using a model that they've used on the last deal and they're just bringing it forward. Or in the case of the builders, it's a template model and they're getting certain information from underwriters, financial advisors, and they're just plugging those numbers into the pro forma. Every time they change a number, they got to go run out and get another analysis. But oftentimes what our clients will pay us to do is to incorporate all of the different bells and whistles that we've just brought together as part of our planning process, meaning the special districts, the cost sharing, the reimbursement agreements, the development impact fees, the development impact fee credit analysis, the construction sales tax, the tax increment, all of these items into the pro forma so that as our land uses change, as our home prices change, as our phasing changes, we're able to show in real time what those impacts are on all of our different reimbursements so that we can drill down and come up with the best, highest, and best use, if I can use that term, for the financing. What is most impactful, what is least impactful. So when we go into negotiations with the cities, we know that if we have to give on one, we know what that financial impact is in advance, and maybe we're willing to give up those to give wins to the city, but they haven't run the numbers on it. They don't know what we're giving up, and we're giving up the least valuable of the things we're asking for. So it's really, really key, obviously, that we're running the cash flow and the pro formas, and that this becomes even more important if you're IRR driven. We need to, see what reducing, eliminating, deferring, issuing different bond types does to the IRR, etc. And the same thing with nominal dollar over time. So here again, this is part of what we do when it comes into the planning of financing. Then with that, we develop the project path and plan for discussions with our clients. And as part of this, we've done all the analysis that we've talked about in the last podcasts. We've run the financial sensitivity of an analysis, and we're laying out what we think we should be going to ask the jurisdiction for. This is really our path and our plan, and shows how we're going to get from where we're at today to the project vision, and what types of financing mechanisms are going to get us there. And with that, we go through all of the different mechanisms and discuss the pros and the cons of all of those items that are in the project path and plan, have our client rate those and say, yes, I like this. No, I don't like this. You've gone too high on this, back down on that. Let's issue this kind of bond. But with all of that, we are, coming up with a very holistic document that provides the clarity and the flexibility to allow our clients to adjust for changing market circumstances and conditions. And once we have that, we begin to draft what we call the finance plan, which we will be utilizing for presentation to the jurisdiction and asking them for what we need to move our project forward. Literally, the finance plan is, we try to boil it down to a very simplistic document that describes the project, what it's entitled for, what the construction costs are, and the mechanisms we would like the jurisdiction to assist us with, meaning special districts, meaning tax increment, meaning reimbursement agreements, development impact fee credits, construction sales tax, transaction sales tax, all of the different things that we have discussed during our project path and plan, and that our client has said, yes, let's go forward and let's ask the city for these things. And as we're going through the finance plan with the jurisdiction, explaining to them who we are, what we're doing, what our timing is, what the benefits to the city would be, and what we're asking them to do to be a partner with us to develop this community, we're able to, within, just watching body language, their comments, etc., get a pretty good feel for what they're going to allow us to do, meaning we've accomplished that goal, what things they're not going to let us to do, so now we take those off the table, and which things are maybe that may require further discussions with the city as part of what we're going to be describing in our remaining discussions of the launch sequence, meaning the implementation process and the management process. But now we've got a pretty clear understanding of what we can do and what we can't do. And as part of this finance plan, we also use it to set up a schedule to move forward with the implementation of this finance plan based on our discussions with the jurisdiction. And that concludes the planning process as it relates to the launch sequence. And in our next podcast, we're going to be getting into the implementation stage of the launch sequence. I hope you found this podcast interesting. I really encourage you that if you haven't listened to our first and our second podcast as it relates to the planning process of the launch sequence, that you go back to do that, because all of these podcasts build on one another and lay out the thinking required, or at least that we go through, and shows the distinction of, when you come to us, the kind of thinking that you get, as opposed to whether you're just asking somebody for a bond sizing. Because as we all know, those of us that are in the trenches, financing infrastructure, building real communities, creating real spaces in the environment, it's not as easy as running a bond sizing. There are a lot of moving pieces, and they all have to be thought about, and they have to be thought about clear-eyed and responsibly, so that we can craft a meaningful, executable finance plan. Thank you very much for your time. Talk to you next time.
You have been listening to the Land to Lots podcast with Carter Froelich. Follow us wherever you find your podcasts to never miss a new episode.